behind the moat at Eltham Palace. Something was very wrong. This was not a royal nursery full of lullabies and warm milk. It was a death trap, a gilded quarantine where Tudor children vanished one by one. And the court learned to smile through it. Edmund dead at 16 months. 3 princes gone before their first breath. Edward coughing up blood at 15. The richest family in England could not buy immunity from the darkness creeping through those corridors. If you are ready to step inside the Tudor nursery where half the royal children never made it out alive, hit subscribe, because this story does not just get sad, it gets brutal. 2 hours by horse from the glittering court of Westminster stood Eltham Palace, surrounded by 600 acres of hunting grounds. A massive moat stretched 100 feet across, sealing it off like a fortress built to protect something precious. To the outside world, this was the safest place in England, a sanctuary where the royal children, the dynasty's future, could grow up far from London's filth. Courtiers spoke of clean air, quiet gardens, and careful attendance, but those who walked its halls knew the truth. Eltham was not just a nursery, it was a quarantine with a crown on top, and once death entered, the moat only helped it stay. Eltham was magnificent. The great hall could host 800 people beneath a hammer-beam roof that seemed to touch heaven. Tapestries glowed, gold flashed, everything screamed power, wealth, victory. And yet, something felt wrong in the air, like a room that looks clean but smells faintly of sickness. The children of Henry VII, and later Henry VIII, were sent here as infants, sometimes just weeks old, to be raised far from their parents. That part was normal for royalty. What was not normal was how often the nursery turned quiet, and how quickly the staff learned to stop asking why. Eltham sat deliberately isolated, positioned close enough for physicians to ride fast from Greenwich, but far enough to keep the children away from the diseases crawling through London. The logic sounded perfect. London in the early 1500s was a death trap. Plague swept the city. Sweating sickness could kill a healthy adult in 12 hours. Consumption rotted lungs for months, then finished the job. So the Tudors built distance, rules, and fear into a system they believed could outsmart death. But isolation cuts both ways. The moat kept dangers out. Yes, it also trapped whatever slipped inside. And the children were the ones who paid. The royal children grew up knowing their parents through brief formal visits. They were raised by servants and tutors, surrounded by luxury, but starved of the one thing that might have comforted the most family when sickness came, and it always came. These children died far from their mother's arms, not in the warmth of a parent's lap, but in carefully scrubbed rooms where attendants whispered prayers and wiped sweat from small foreheads. The nursery ran like a tiny kingdom. It had its own staff, its own rules, its own rhythm, and inside that rhythm was a terrible pattern no matter how controlled everything was. Children kept dying. Dozens of servants were assigned to keep the royal infants alive. Rockers to sway cradles through the night. Laundresses to clean linens daily. Wet nurses to feed them. Physicians to monitor every cough, every fever, every rash. Everything was measured, watched, controlled. Yet for all the careful attention, the nursery stayed haunted by the same truth. Tudor power meant nothing to disease. Behind those moat walls, death did not care about bloodlines. It took princes the way it took beggars, cold and deficient. And the moment the court realized that, the rules became obsessive. Every servant who approached the nursery was questioned like a criminal. Had they been to London? Had they visited anyone sick? Had they touched anyone who coughed, sweated, or showed fever? One wrong answer and they were turned away at the gates, fired on the spot. During summer months, when disease surged. The royal children were forbidden from visiting London at all. They stayed locked behind Eltham's walls while their father held feasts in places they would never see. If any staff member felt ill, even with something as small as a head cold, they were expelled immediately. No exceptions. In this nursery, a sneeze could destroy a dynasty. Fear seeped into everything. Servants lived terrified of showing weakness. Knowing a cough could cost them their position and leave their families starving. The nursery became a place scrubbed clean of anything that might carry death. Serving boys were banned, considered too risky. Dogs were forbidden, even though other noble households loved them. The belief was simple animals carried sickness in their fur, spreading invisible death with every nuzzle. So the children grew up in a world without warmth, spontaneity, or normal joy, a sterile childhood built from terror. And that terror came from the top, because Henry VIII feared disease like a man fears a knife at his throat. Henry VIII was an extreme hypochondriac, and his fear shaped how his children lived. His apartments overflowed with potions, ointments, and remedies for every imaginable ailment. He submitted to examinations constantly, convinced death lurked in every shadow. The fear was not irrational. He had watched his brother Arthur die at 15. He had seen his mother, Elizabeth of York, fall to fever. He had watched nobles vanish in their prime, struck down without warning. In Henry's mind, strict protocols were not cruelty, they were survival. If controlling every detail could keep his children alive, he would control everything. But control cannot choke out what is coming. In the summer of 1499, the nursery seemed to be working. The children looked healthy. Distinguished visitors arrived to admire them, impressed by how robust and well-kept the Tudor offspring appeared. It looked like a sanctuary. In September, the great scholar Erasmus arrived at Eltham with his friend Thomas More. They were led through guarded halls into the nursery where the youngest Tudors played under watchful eyes. Erasmus was delighted. 8-year-old Henry, the future Henry VIII, greeted him confidently. Margaret and Mary played nearby. And there was baby Edmund Tudor, 16 months old, rosy and lively. Erasmus left convinced the system worked. 9 months later, Edmund was dead. June 1500 brought the killing season. Summer heat turned London into a festering wound. Plague crept through the city, jumping street to street like a hungry animal. The royal household made a fast decision: move the children immediately. Eltham, despite its moat, sat too close to spreading infection. The nursery was relocated north to Hatfield House, deeper into the countryside, further from danger. It should have saved them. It did not matter. Whatever found Edmund did not need London to do its work. The toddler fell ill with burning fever and weakness so deep he could barely cry. Physicians watched helplessly as a prince slipped away. Alone, Edmund died far from his parents. Henry VII and Elizabeth of York were travelling when a messenger reached them. Their youngest son, the child they had sent away to protect, was gone. The irony was crushing. Protection had become isolation, and isolation had become a lonely death. The court handled it quietly. No grand mourning processions through London. Royal child deaths were common enough that public spectacle risked looking weak. Edmund was buried with minimal ceremony. His short life reduced to a few lines in record books. But for Elizabeth of York, something broke. Edmund had lived long enough to smile, to reach for her during rare visits. He was not a stillborn hope. He was a living child who simply stopped existing. And the darkness was not finished with her. 3 years passed. Those close to the Queen noticed the change. a quietness settling over her, a distance behind her eyes. Even during celebration, she had united York and Lancaster, stabilized England, done everything duty demanded.